Soren Narnia, welcome to Reader's Labyrinth, and pick up in the train of thought that we were having off air, my man. It was too good, folks. I had to hit record mid-sentence.
We were going deep. We were going deep about the human beings and their infinite complexity. And I was just saying to Frank that maybe one of the problems in society is that we all can't seem to face the fact of how complex people are. We want to assign a narrative to every story and every person, pigeonhole them into one aspect of their personalities. We can't accept that people can be dark and light, like really dark and really light in the same human being. And what would a society look like that can actually finally accept that? And how that would change everything if would there be just less judgment across the board? Would there be less crime? So Frank, tell me what it would be like.
Well, so we were talking a little bit about philosophy, and we were also talking a little bit about your latest story on Knifepoint Horror Colony, which, guys, it's totally awesome, and you will find a link in the show notes. I promise the link will work. I got some comments. I had to go back and fix that last time. And so if you guys haven't listened to Colony, I'm going to sum it up for you and tell you all of the spoilers and how it ends. But no, I'm joking. But we were discussing the pre-Socratic Greek philosopher Heraclitus, and he made all kind of observations, which we're not 100% sure if he was an actual person or if he was a collection of thinkings and schools of philosophy at that time. However, Aristotle seemed to think he was a real person, and he made a comment that, a person cannot step into the same river twice in reference to human nature. And what he meant by that was that you can take a human being, but our nature is changing from one minute to the next. And he tied this into this notion of what was called the divine logos, which has since been hijacked by the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages under Thomas Aquinas, but I'm not going to go there. But he had an idea that human nature is like a fire. It's always changing, yet it's always the same. And that in total chaos that is in human nature, there's a secret order that underlines human nature. And me and Soren were having a discussion about policing and how policing has changed in America. And I brought up an observation that I think one of the problems that we face is that most of our policies are written by folks, and with respect to folks, but folks who come from an MBA program, who come from the STEM, accountants, and they have this idea that if we can quantify a problem, if we can define a problem, then we can solve a problem. But I think me and Soren are kind of leaning along the post that we need more of a humanities approach to things. We need folks who majored in history, philosophy, art, English, because that's where humanity is. It doesn't exist in the STEM colleges, at least in my opinion. And I think that, kind of going back to what Soren is saying, there's light in human beings and there's darkness. There's this hidden unity in human society. And so what would that society look like if we were able to kind of claw our way towards it? I think it would look like a pre-modern society. I think we would live in an enchanted world again, where we leave the door open to an X factor in our life. It's just one facet of what that would look like.
It's funny, human beings always want to believe that we're this close to figuring everything out. We always think, we're making such incredible strides in psychology and solving the world's problems. We're just this close. We just need a couple more innovations, a couple more generations, and we will get there. But in reality, I think that is not true. I think that people are just so infinitely complex. Like the least interesting person in the world walking down the street outside my window, you could write 10,000 volumes about their life. The least interesting person. But we like to think that we pretend that we can figure it all out. The human mind, all the social problems that we have that continue to just cycle through the generations, all the problems come back that we had generations ago. We just can't seem to admit to ourselves, like, yeah, you know what, we're not close. It feels like we make little tiny steps forward in understanding things, but in reality, we're wow, we have such a long way to go. But that's kind of a depressing thought. So I think we just try to con ourselves into thinking, oh yeah, we have this new way of dealing with things. This is going to work. We finally figured it out. Hooray for us. I'm just more pessimistic about that.
Not only that, Soren, but to kind of, to piggyback off what you're saying, it seems like these innovations that come out, they become almost on like, well, they're almost elevated to a mystical level. And like, if you look at transhumanism, for instance, I mean, you have these techies, you have scientists, and, you have some secular philosophers out there who are pushing this. Like the dude whose last name starts with a K that I cannot pronounce is Kollwitz, or however you pronounce it, but they are avowed atheist. They are anti-spiritualist. They don't believe in a metaphysical reality. Until they open their mouth up about transhumanism and uplifting the human mind into a machine and copying the algorithms of our head and, being able to replicate all the electronic stuff that's going on. And then all of a sudden, I mean, I'm talking to a Greek, a Platonic philosopher who thinks that there's something about the human mind that has a perfect abstract essence somewhere, this form somewhere. And so with each of our new innovations, it kind of goes back to what Friedrich Nietzsche said about in his book, Twilight of the Idols, which I've since started kind of reading. Again, not at work, totally not at work, all on my lunch break, but he was talking about the scientism of 19th century Europe had become the new idols that people were worshiping at and putting all of their hope into. Just kind of, to kind of go off of that observation that you were making there, Soren.
Right, like every historical epoch needs something to idolize, and something has to be the great dream that we can all strive for. Now it seems to be computer technology, artificial intelligence, virtual reality. We think, okay, this is going to be the thing that allows us to do things. Every generation needs that, but I do wonder, the transhumanism, I don't think it'll happen in our lifetimes, but maybe 50 years from now, where the definition of human will start to be slightly in debate. I'm almost glad that I think I'll be out of the picture. Do you ever have these moments where you think, boy, I'm glad I'll be dead by the time this inevitable thing happens in our society? Because that was like seven or eight things like that. Yeah, right. At first I thought it was the pitch clock in baseball, but it looks like I'm going to survive to see that. But, on a bigger scale, this transhumanism thing where, how worshipful will people get of this while we're still alive? And are we racing against the clock to have so many things implanted in us? Or are we going to shift our consciousness to other things, or will we implant things in ourselves to house our consciousness? I don't know. It's pretty freaky, man. I don't know. I'm not down with it.
What's really cool about it and thinking about these terms and is something I like to give some brain power to is the presuppositions that go into the worldview of transhumanism. Because if you take the worldview and we try and distill it down and think to ourselves, okay, what are the premises of the argument that they're making? And they're saying one thing about human nature and ultimate reality. And what they're saying is that that consciousness is just an illusion. That, you and me having this conversation right now is simply the result of our electrons. They're bouncing across, and who I think is Soren Narnia is not really Soren Narnia, which is kind of true in a pun kind of way. That's not, but, just kind of setting that aside, they don't believe in like a metaphysical soul. They think that everything is material, that everything is on a reducible scale. And a lot of them are determinists. They don't believe in free will, which we can argue about the existence of free will or not, but they make this presuppositional leap that's actually a logical fallacy. And I cannot remember if it's a formal fallacy or not, but they make this leap to, okay, it's determinism. and everything is material. And they reject utterly a mysterious and enchanted universe. And so that's the worldview that's driving transhumanism. And so if we try and reach the transhumanism, their utopia, this up here, for me, that's not the real scary part. The real scary part is what's going to happen in between. I mean, are we going to run into a brave new world in between, a 1984 on our way up here? Because let's assume best case scenario that this is a utopia. What's it going to look like trying to get us there? Because if you look at rulers in history that have said, okay, human nature is not metaphysical. Human nature is deterministic. I mean, that's Hitler, that's Stalin, that's Mao. And look at the visions of the world that they were trying to usher in. When they try and separate from this great tradition of a human being as having a soul. And these transhumanists, I mean, they look at you and me as no different than an iPhone. The only thing is that, we happen to be these skin sacks that walk around with chemical reactions in them instead of this hard plastic, computer that's doing it. So the worldview of the humanists, I find it to be a scary one because they would look at us and say, well, there's nothing special about mankind. We're essentially just, piles of dirt that's having a irrational conversation. It's the most bizarre. And then you get into like this weird circular reasoning with them. And it's like, okay, you deny that other minds exist. They deny that consciousness exists, that free will exists. And then you're just in this weird place with them. Well, they'll just go everywhere. And I don't know. It's just hard for me to have a conversation with them. And it's like, but there's something ironically in their human nature that wants the utopia, that looks at our human society and says, hey, this could be done a lot better. And that's why they're doing what they're doing. But it's like they won't acknowledge the very human nature that's compelling them to go down this path. It's kind of strange to me. Sorry about that.
I remember long ago, I was really awakened by, I don't know, I read some book about the theory that, perhaps we're all just brains in a jar and, we're being fed electromagnetic impulses to see what happens. And there have been times in my life where, let's say I'm watching a movie. Let's say I'm watching Night of the Living Dead, and I'm watching Barbara there in the cemetery, and I've had thoughts like,
Soren, damn it.
I've had thoughts like, this Barbara character, how is she not as real as I am? Everyone knows this Barbara character. More people know the Barbara character and feel like they know her and know her person than will ever know me or you. And then you have the actor playing the Barbara character, putting her own essence into this thing that then appears on the screen that plays eternally on screens throughout the world since 1968. I think to myself, am I flattering myself because, well, I'm me, right? I must be special. But is there maybe a consciousness that grows inside this Barbara character because she was created? Does she become real to herself in a way? And I just think, the notion of which of us are real and doing things of our own accord it gets very thin if you start really thinking about it. And that's when I do get kind of the chills thinking, ooh, what if there is something to it's so illusory that there is some kind of programming going on, that we are, we're data points programmed by others. Look what we can do with computers now. We'll be able to create these artificial humans that maybe we could convince are having thoughts of their own. And I try to convince myself, no, I have a soul. I'm real. This cannot be. But as life progresses in this digital age, every time you turn around, you're confronted with some sort of scientific advance that opens up the door to the possibility of oh no, I do not want to think that I was created in a lab and that I am one of the early AI prototypes, the one who spills everything can't make any money, can't hold a job very well, but they're working on me, you know? So I wonder about this in odd moments. It's too mind blowing to figure out, but I sometimes have my doubts. I mean, what do you think the percentages are that I am real, Frank? Do I strike you as real? What do you think? See, I'm moving around pretty impressively, right? Cheer me up. I want to believe I'm real.
In the corner of your apartment, there's this machine, and it has a typewriter. And it's just, it's projecting a Soren Narnia image on here. Well, right. That was a question that Rene Descartes asked in his second Meditations, I think. He was a 17th century French philosopher, and he did a lot of theory of mind. So he was really big into epistemology, and he asked a whole lot of questions like that. How could we be certain back then that there was not a deceiving demon that was creating the reality around us? And these people that I'm talking to was actually created by this supreme creature. And I think, well, there's so much to unpack in what you just said, but to kind of start, I think that when human beings first had fire, we started to use our technology as metaphors and stories and analogies to what ultimate reality is. We started to ask the ontological questions in our stories, and we were asking the epistemological questions in our technology. And it's funny how you made that observation. I think about computers today, Frank, and basically, are we a simulation? Are we a data point? And it's funny because if we were having this discussion, let's say 200 years ago, we probably would have had an analogy to ontology about the steam engine. Hey, how do we know that this steam engine really isn't doing X, Y, and Z? What if the steam engine, there's a big one on the other side of the moon, this combustible engine that's creating the clouds in the sky? And you can actually see some discussions like this. A good example of this as well is the UFO the phenomenon. Folks in medieval Europe thought it was demons because that was about the limit of their technology. And then once they advanced to the age of sail, the UFOs began to look like sailboats were coming down out of the sky. And it's almost like the UFOs, the aliens, are just one technological step ahead of our ontological perception of the world around us. And that's what's so weird about technology, that we would even think about the simulation theory. Would we have thought about that without our technology? And so again, it's almost like the format that we have this conversation in informs the content that we're having here and how we perceive the conversation. But to answer your question, the basic starting point of theory of mind is that you can be reasonably certain that you are having the thoughts that you are having. And that's all that you can be 100% certain of. I can be 99% certain, logically speaking and statistically speaking, that you're a real person. But even if I met you in the flesh, even if I drove up to wherever you live, I don't know if I want to say it now, but if I drove to your place and I knocked on the door and we shared a cup of coffee, then we went out and we had a beer or whatever, is that really Soren Narnia? Was that a replicant? I mean, there's all this other stuff. I mean, all this other kind of crazy stuff. And I'll throw in another monkey wrench for us now that we're going down the rabbit hole. The universe, and I learned this like 3 weeks ago, I think, because my daughter was staying up late, so I have all this time now to watch some documentaries on the universe. But basically they said, so if the universe is finite, if there's an end to it, then light should look like this. It should make like a bending, like we should see it bend as light is going away from the Big Bang. But we don't. Light is just making a straight line as far as our telescopes can see. And they're saying, look, either the universe is a whole lot bigger than what we thought, or the universe is infinite. And if the universe is infinite, then all possibilities are not only possible, but they're probable. Maybe in one of these infinite universes, I could be a character in one of your stories. I like to think about that. I don't know how much comfort that brings me.
Well, what if you you could be both real and a character in one of my stories? The whole multiple.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The multiverse theory, which again, I can't get my head around half the stuff going on in this kooky universe, especially the multiverse theory. But I have always just kind of assumed that the universe was infinite. But again, only because in my small human mind, that's the only thing that makes sense. I would figure to myself, well, why would there be an end to the universe? What purpose would that serve? But we can't think about what purpose something would serve because we don't know anything. We don't know why we're here. We don't know if we're real. It's it's amazing that our minds simply don't implode when we start to think about how small we are in the universe. This doesn't actually not get us down on a daily basis. We don't wake up every day depressed because even though we know how tiny a speck of the mote of dust in the vast cosmos is, you would think that would really make it difficult to get out of bed, but it doesn't. There's something implanted in our consciousness from birth, like a self-defense mechanism, saying, "Look, you're going to realize soon enough how meaningless you are, but that's not going to send you jumping off a building." The fact that there's nothing on streaming will depress you even more than that. So it's almost there's something been implanted in us, certain defense mechanisms against the terrifying smallness of us that make life bearable. And I do wonder, why are those there? Is it just to keep us alive, just enough to reproduce? And then the universe doesn't care what happens to us? Because that was always one of my suspicions, that this relentless drive toward reproduction that's implanted, and how the universe and nature seem to stop caring about us as soon as we are old enough to have cared for the next generation, and how we age and decline. That always kind of got me down. I don't know where I'm going with that, but just the design of the universe seems so I'm trying to detect a plan, and I'm just not seeing it. I'm just not seeing what will the high point of human existence in our universe be? If you could chart the ups and downs of this crazy world of ours on Earth, where do you think we are on the bar graph of reaching our greatest heights as human beings? Right now in the year 2022, do you think we're anywhere near the top of the curve? And is there a curve?
Oh yeah. Well, in order to answer that question, I can only give, of course, a limitation of my cultural context, my very, very limited scientific, which is almost nothing knowledge base. But here's what I have suspect. If you look at the history of the human race, okay, Soren, and you basically brought up, the Agent Smith argument that humanity will breed, will move from one area, and we kind of spread off of that. There's all these other little quirks to human nature that serve no evolutionary purpose whatsoever, yet absolutely give meaning to our life. If you look at any kind of philosophy, the problem of other minds, when we talk about ethics and we talk about this stuff, that's not going to help you go out and find a mate, and then kill a dinosaur and drag it into your cave at all. I mean, it's just not going to do that. But we have that, and that's almost a defining portion of what a human being is. And there's so many things, Soren, about human nature that you cannot point to evolution. I mean, I acknowledge the theory of evolution. I fully believe in it. But I think it's only half the story. I think there's something else going on that has given you and the rest of humanity a priori knowledge about the universe and about reality that doesn't come from the theory of evolution. It doesn't come from the natural world as we define it. I believe that there is a super reality. I believe in the unseen Platonic forms, if that makes any kind of sense. And where is humanity going? Well, let's take a strictly material view of it. Have you heard of the Kardashev level scale of civilizations before, or have you run across that?
No. What's that?
Yes. Prepare to have a rabbit hole opening. So we mentioned the Fermi Paradox the last time we were talking, right? We did. I can assure you of that. I have So in 1950, Frank Schumpert cannot remember the exact date, there was a theoretical physicist by the name of Enrico Fermi. He had worked on the Manhattan Project and our nuclear program as well. And he postulated in a conversation, he said, where are all the other civilizations? When we look through our telescopes, we see a natural world, yet there's no reason it should look like that. And this became the Fermi Paradox. Out of the Fermi Paradox, I believe there was a Soviet scientist back in the 70s. And again, I'm kind of fuzzy on the background, but he postulated this, that you had different levels of civilizations. And we name them Kardashev level civilizations. Right now, to answer your question, and I know I'm doing a donut, right? But to answer your original question of where we're at, I think that humanity is, we are right below a Kardashev level civilization. And what defines a Kardashev level 1 civilization is that you can control through energy your entire planet. You can control the weather patterns. You can control how your cells divide, how your DNA is expressed itself. We're already at the cusp of that shit right now. You have CRISPR-Cas9 that can alter, a grown male. It can tell cancer cells to stop replicating. They're having breakthroughs in this area. You can design or order a baby. To have blue eyes, red hair, whatever kind of combination that you want. And there's talk about a Dyson swarm. I don't know if you've ever heard about this. The idea of putting it would be a structure around our star, our sun, and basically could absorb a fraction of the star's energy, which would be more power than the Earth would need. If we can control all the power on Earth, then we're a Kardashev level 1, I believe. Kardashev level 2 civilization is you can control all the energy and resources in your star system is what you can do. And there's different levels of civilization, okay? And I think it goes up to 7 or 9, kind of depending on who you talk to. But here's the real freaky part of this, and this is where, the mind is prepared to be blown, okay? If you we will not reach the final Kardashev level civilization, whether a 7 or 9, again, depending on who you talk to. And the reason for is they are the creator civilizations. In other words, how do we know when we look out at the universe that it's not all artificial? We have nothing
because a further advanced civilization got so advanced that it created the earlier versions.
Through another Big Bang. Exactly. Right. So we would never reach that final one. So I think that we're approaching a Kardashev level 1 is what I think. And wow. I think, and if we read what, it was either Stephen Hawking's or it was Arthur C. Clarke. And again, guys, I'm sorry about the misquote, but he said, any advanced technological civilization, so a high Kardashev level civilization, their technology to us is going to look like magic. It's not going to look like the Starship Enterprise.
Right. It's
magic.
Exactly. It'll be so far beyond, right? Because they'll have solved the time jumping and space jumping, and the transportation will have almost no meaning. But here's my question: is that, let's say we get to up to about level 4 or 5 there, and we poll every human being on Earth at that point we ask them one question: are you happy? Is it possible that we're going to find, through all these advances in civilization, that happiness doesn't really increase? Because isn't what it's all really about in the end is that we're trying to make ourselves happier on Earth. But are we actually, as a mass of humanity, are we happier than we were before, let's say, farming before? Because what could be a more simple existence than someone wakes up, they hunt, they fish, they gather, they reproduce, they have their own happinesses, surely. And then when they reach a certain age, they're consumed, they die, or they die of very simple things, and that just goes on. Is a level 4 or 5 or 6 civilization a better place to live? Really, are people as happy? Are we getting any happier with all these advances, do you think?
Well, let's take the question and let's go to a first principle then. What is happiness? How would you define happiness?
Well, I think that would be the key, is this hypothetical poll would have to be so simple because everyone has their own definition. And so the question would simply be, are you happy? Because that allows for such a wide variety of response that hopefully it would average out, and there would be some sort of general understanding of what is meant by "are you happy?" So some people wouldn't know, some people would get it completely wrong, some people would have their own crazy theories, but hopefully there would be like a median there. So we don't really have to think about what it means, because exactly it's the individual. Every individual has their own definition. And we would have to let that, for the experiment to work, to get to good answers, we would have to let them define it however they choose. Because if we try to apply a definition, things get real sticky.
So I have been reading Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche. And since I had Dr. Jeffrey Kripal on, I don't know if you saw my interview with him, he basically said I needed to read Nietzsche's other work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which I've had a copy ever since high school, and much to my shame. It's a very tough read, and it's a very brutish book. I mean, he's very ruthless, and it's so funny. I mean, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he'll say what a great philosopher he is. He is just so profound. He is so brilliant. And I found when I'm reading him, I'm like, look, man, I was like, why is he telling me he's great? But then I read it, I'm like, he really is great. It's like, what a weirdo. But his answer to your question about happiness is that he believed that humanity behind us is the ape, right? We are descended from the ape, and we are evolving to a higher level, and we're walking a tightrope right now, and that's where humanity is. Beyond us is the Übermensch, which is really the every human, or the Superman. And he believed that the Übermensch had the ability to bend space and time around themselves, and it was an ontological breakdown of what we know as reality, terms like good and evil, happiness and sadness, and that this new reality would come out to where happiness wouldn't even apply as a categorical imperative anymore. Much like a butterfly would have no conception of eating an apple when it was once a caterpillar, what the reality of being the caterpillar was like. And so for me, it's like, I think that human nature, kind of going back to Heraclitus, is always changing, yet there is something in it that, is unchanging. There's an order to it. And I think that if we could ever get to that level of a Kardashev level civilization, I think that the very nature of humanity will have changed to such a degree that I don't know if the term happiness could apply to us in much the same way as good and evil could apply to us. Because in order to understand good and evil, especially to a degree that like you willed in your stories, you have to have a part of your brain that is developed in a superior way to our pre-human ancestors, to the Cro-Magnon. We don't believe that their brain was shaped like ours. We believe they were developed differently, and so they would have had different categorical imperatives. They may not have had a notion of good and evil. They may not have had stories at all, which it doesn't look like they did, much to their detriment, because the Homo sapiens, as we moved into the territory of Cro-Magnon and of our pre-human, or of the alternate branches of humanity, we could tell ourselves stories around the campfire about them, and our stories always had a hero, a strategy and tactic on how to take them out. So I apologize for my rambling, but to kind of sum up, I think by then the question will be nonsensical. It'll be like a pharaoh coming to our time and asking the president if his virgin sacrifices have made it rain. We're just going to look at him and be like, "You are from another time, buddy."
Do you think?
Which we may, yeah.
I was going to say, do you think it's conceivable that what we need to do, and maybe what we're trying to work toward, is, how we're all very wrapped up in the notion of ourself. We're addicted to ourselves, ourself. We think about ourself constantly, how things affect us personally. We are trying to be happy in life. We are trying to make ourselves better, the self. We're always trying to improve the self. Do you think we should be moving, or are we moving toward, is that perfect civilization someday? What it looks like is that we've all left ourselves behind. We've all given ourselves over finally to the group, to each other, to the civilization. We are finally not obsessed with our mortality, with our identity. We've left it behind. Is that something that, do you think we are all, the evolution of this better human, is that part of it, like getting rid of this notion of ourself, which we're just stuck with day after day, moving toward a more of a community mind where each of us recognizes that everyone is as important as we are? Is that like a goal that would that be an honorable goal for a civilization like that? Or is even that meaningless?
Well, I think it comes down to the nature of self. And is the self an artificial construct? And I don't know the answer to that, Soren. I think, now, if you look at Eastern philosophies, like Buddhism, Hinduism, they seem to believe that our consciousness came from a giant shared reality, is what it was. And we're basically little snippets or expressions of that reality. And in the Western world, they took a little different track than that. What they basically said is that each individual consciousness is an expression of a separate infinity, is what it is. And that's what we call the soul. So on the one hand, I think it could be both. I think we could be unified in some conscious kind of way with each other. And I think that we could have our own infinitudes expressed within us, is what we could do. Because just our conversation right now, we're using language that is shaping our thoughts, but we're both coming at it from a different perspective altogether. And another thing about it that's weird is that me and you are trapped in a linear timeline. You know, what happened in the past is in the past. We're in the present. We are stuck in the present, really. The future is at what, let's see, how does the saying go? The past is not real. The future is an illusion. There is only the present. That's our reality right now. So to me, I would say that conscious individuals exist with our own infinities. That would be my first kind of premise. And the second one would be that isolation that we feel is one of time, because we don't have the energy, I guess, to collapse the past and the present and the future all into one. And again, kind of going back to Nietzsche, he talks about this eventual plane that human beings will reach, where we can do that. And if you look at like the writings of the Buddha in its various, the translations that were translated, most of your gurus seem to think that we would arrive at something like that. That even, pain and evil were illusions because we're just trapped in the present. So, it's like, okay, is that sense of isolation because we're not talking to people? Well, that would probably affect me if I lived in the present the entire time, which I do, and it does. I don't know if that answered your question. That was stream of consciousness from Frank. Lost thoughts, I guess, in the labyrinth.
Well, this living in the present thing is something else I wonder about because, I'm old enough now that I have a huge, powerful sense of nostalgia, and it brings a lot of pleasure to just revel in nostalgia. Sometimes everything, you go over to your bookshelf, you pick up a book from 20 years ago that you loved, and so in a way, then okay, in those moments, you were living in the past, and then worrying about, say, getting a better job or what your next car is going to be like, or, are your kids going to be okay? Then in those moments, you're living with a foot in the future. And it seems like about half our day is spent not in the present, where our minds are either stuck in the past, either pleasantly or not pleasantly, or stuck in the future, worrying, stressing, or being optimistic about it. So our bodies are here in the present, and the structure of our brains, but our consciousness seems to be kind of divvied up each and every day, past, present, and future, all going on in the same thought stream all at once sometimes.
Isn't that the beautiful thing about human nature? Like, we've been talking for almost 45 minutes. We're trying to nail it down into categories, and it eludes us. And you came up with a good counterexample to kind of what I was thinking about. It's like, yeah, I mean, we evolved for the present. We evolved to go, to reproduce, gather some resources, run from the dinosaur that's trying to chase us. Yet at the same time, we have this weird evolutionary tick that may not have come from evolution that makes us think about tomorrow, next year, that makes us envision a world for our children. Hey, that lightning that struck the tree, it would be great if I had that. If I had that heat, man, I could really warm up. I mean, it was able to have abstract reasoning. And at the kernel of all that is the imagination, is what it is. It's like this divine spark to imagine a narrative of your own life. And, when me and Jeff Kripal were talking, and this is, my worldview right now is what the late Anne Strieber, the late wife of Whitley Strieber, the author of Communion in the series, what she said, that the human race is too young to have beliefs, only questions. And I believe through direct experience and what I've read and what I've seen that consciousness survives death, whatever death is. I mean, because if my imagination can transcend time and space, then who's to say that the consciousness that birthed it won't? And I don't believe that consciousness is local. I'm fully convinced that your meat sack is sitting there nodding along, but I am not fully convinced that the, creative brain that is, that wrote Colony is really this close to me. We could all be sharing the same space for all I know, or you could be on the other side of the universe. And now there are some schools of thought. Some of them think that the body is, a material expression of the soul. And some of the Greeks thought that your body is like a suit of armor that you wear and that you just kind of pilot it. So, I don't know. And, even if you were to take,
where do they fall into the?
Well, the sweatpants is going to fall into the dirty laundry, and I already know what happens around dirty clothes, so I have to be very careful these days.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, it's. I know. Yeah, I'm just thinking of this now. That one of the definitions of a human being is that we are able to see our whole lives. We can see the sweep of our whole lives, past, present, and future, where other organisms cannot. We were given that and it doesn't seem like much of a survival thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That doesn't help me escape the dinosaur. Well, past experience, sure, but when I get misty-eyed over something that happened in sixth grade or a song by the Beatles, that doesn't help me evade the dinosaurs. Or thinking, about, boy, if the Dallas Cowboys get another couple of draft picks, maybe they'll win the NFC East in 2 years. That's not dinosaur escaping thoughts. And yet, as a human being, I can envision that future. That's weird. That is partially what makes us human. I also get a little bit optimistic. I remember thinking once, because I'm always trying to think. Look, there's reasons that human beings are special. There's a reason that your life has meaning, and that we are not just sacks of goop. And I sometimes think of, let's say, take a divorced couple in their 70s. They've been divorced for 30 years. Their kids are long grown out of the house. And let's say one of the spouses, ex-spouses, has some money issues or gets sick. And the person they've been divorced from forever, and they're both out of their reproductive years, comes to their aid, helps them out with the money, or comes to their bedside when they're sick. And I think, why would they do that? If it's all just blind evolution, they can't reproduce with the other person. They've long since, they have no need for them physically anymore to help them rear the children. And yet there's this love, right? There's still this love. Like that's not an evolutionary thing, right? There's no reason that they should bother with each other if it's all just primitive reproduction and bags of goop. So I do think there are reasons for the kind of optimism that I think you have for the beauty of humanity. I see, but I have to think of them. I have to strain my poor brain to think of them. Whereas I think you're someone who, almost innately has that sense that there of this goodness and this design. Where I have to put it on a chalkboard. And and sometimes I cross it out. No, I thought I would be optimistic about humanity. Nope, it's not working. I have to test these things out like a fighter pilot to see if they work.
It isn't that I have faith in humanity. I have faith in what we will become. But instead of that statement turning into a Hallmark greeting card, God forbid, I have faith in what we will become is interacting with us right now on some level. So I think that on an ontological level, humanity has this potential to really kind of make that leap. We're walking the tightrope. The ape is behind us. We can get to the Übermensch. I think humanity has already done that. And I think that humanity in the infinite universe is reaching back towards us right now. And I don't know how. I don't know what that would look like. It could look like God's coming back. It could look like dreams. It could look like prophets or visions. But I think if you look for them, if you look for what humanity will become, you can look in art, you can look in stories, and you can see a meta-narrative, Soren, that rises to the surface in most cultures. And Jeff Kripal wrote a book called Mutants and Mystics, and is about this very subject. And it is chalked, it is source-cited in evidence and where he's getting everything. So, it isn't like me just talking and I can't really cite anything. But he has a hypothesis that, if you look at the mutant story, hey, kids have these weird powers, blah, 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 and the X-Men. And what he says is that could be a metaphor for what's happening to humanity. We're rising up, and there's some kind of change that is going on, and this is what we could become. And either those powers are metaphorical, or they could lead to a difference in how we perceive reality around us. I'm not quite sure what it's going to look like. But, I see goodness out there, but it's because of hard-boiled observations. It's because of evidence that if I were to write a paper, I could have sources cited in it. And another thing that's really fascinating is the existence of a priori knowledge. I don't have to write out a treaty for you to prove that 2 + 2 = 4. Once a 5-year-old can grasp that concept, they understand it. And 2 + 2 = 4 pre-existed humanity. It pre-exists everything that you can see. And the world is not dependent on 2 + 2 = 4, yet that is a reality out there. It's a Platonic reality. And the fact that human beings innately grasp that, it kind of scares me sometimes that we can grasp that magic in the universe of 2 + 2 = 4, that there's such a thing as logic, as logical fallacies, formal and informal. There's deductive reasoning, there's inductive reasoning, and all of this is like in nature, but it's not a part of nature. It's a really weird thing, but it exists a priori in the human mind whenever we're born. And that definitely didn't come from evolution. And so for me, it's like either the universe is weirder than what we think, or there's an intelligence greater than us that's reaching backwards. And whether we call that thing God, we call it ourselves from the future, whatever you want to call it, I don't think that humanity is alone. And I believe that death is only one stage for us as we move forward into the super reality. And as a matter of fact, now the Greeks had different notions of death. The Stoics seem to think that when you die, you were dead. So did the Epicureans, if I'm pronouncing that right. But a lot of the Pythagoreans, a lot of the other cults of Greece at the time believed that, your consciousness survived death and that you would go to a higher plane of reality whenever that happened. And most of humanity has believed this. And there's been all kind of weird cases of people having memories of other lives, which I don't know what to make of that, but just they can tell you the house they were born in. They can take you there. There's been books that have been written on it, but that and some other reasons, it isn't just that I'm kind of starry-eyed, which I am naturally, I see an enchanted world around me, but it's also some hard-boiled stuff that I've observed in my life and just kind of, experienced firsthand. Really, really fascinating stuff. And some scary shit too, but.
Yeah, well, it kind of feels like the best evidence for there being just so much more to the universe is the fact that we even have these thoughts as human beings, because all over the world right now, there are people like you and me who are just yakking about life, the universe, and everything. The fact that our minds can like we're given the ability to attack these concepts. We could be completely wrong about everything, but man, we get to do it. And why would the universe or evolution or whatever give us that gift to see like so many possibilities and to change and be strange and different? And there's so many different kinds of human beings and so many different kind of beliefs. The universe and the earth could function if all of us pretty much had the same opinions about, let's say, the color green or whether there was a God or not. We could, things would get done each and every day if everything were much simpler. If there were only, if there were half the number of species on Earth, half the number of viewpoints, half the number of races and religions, the universe would operate, the Earth would keep going just fine. And yet, it's infinitely more complex than that. That I find heartening, because it is all such a crazy stew of beliefs and possibilities when it probably doesn't have to be to function. It's like the world is this big machine that was designed by a crazy person. That's great. You don't want a perfect, flawless world with moving parts you can always identify. That's boring. Yeah. So these mysteries that we can attack, even if we can't even solve them, that alone is a great gift from, I don't know who gave it to us, but that is fabulous. That we can sit here and talk for an hour and maybe be completely wrong about everything. That is great. That gives me hope for the fact that life maybe does have some kind of meaning.
My greatest hope is that everything that we're saying is wrong. And I hope that 100 years from now, someone is listening to this, and they'll probably be on Alpha Centauri by then, And they're like, they got this wrong, they got this wrong. Soren said one thing for 3 seconds, though, that was as close as they ever got, and they never knew it. I hope that we just keep expanding our knowledge base of the universe. That'd be the most beautiful thing in the world. I love it.
Because really what they're just going to laugh at these things that we have in our heads. Like, oh my God, they could only convey sound to each other in the audience by putting this apparatus on their head. That is so sad that they were still stuck in that. Well,
you see,
screw
kids,
you, future.
Yeah. Well, you see, back then, humans had ears because they were in these little ape-like bodies, and they actually, there's sound waves that went through, and they could hear sound waves. What?
Yeah.
Why couldn't they just think it?
Yeah. This poor, sad people. Well, we do good things too. Have you seen the variety of chewing gum we have nowadays and soda?
Oh, yes.
I mean, can there ever be, no matter how future evolves and civilizations evolve, can we ever have more flavors of soda? No, it's not going to happen. It's impossible. So I think we're doing all right.
Although there is a great evil that's being worked in the soda world, Soren. Great evil from Mordor is brewing. Well,
oh God,
you have seen it. You have probably experienced it. I don't know if you've ever gone into like a fast food chain, like a McDonald's or Burger King, and you had to get your own soda.
Oh yeah,
and it's all on a touch screen now. And then I select my stuff, and it comes out of this one faucet, and then the lines get cleared of everything else that was in there, and they go right into my cup. And instead, it's like, I'm not getting the pure soda. I'm getting like this.
But it's hard because you are tasting the history of all sodas that the people around you. It's great. I love those things. It's like a star map now. It's like, okay, how many options? How many different shots can I have? And when you get behind, because I'm a cheapie, so I go to Noodles and Company and say, can I have a little cup for water? So I go over to the big ice machine. I just hit the big water button. But, when you get behind someone who is ready to make the commitment to complex soda.
Oh, yeah.
And they are looking at grape, cherry, is it a lime day? Is it a lemon day? Is it a root beer? That's pure pain. Pure pain.
And then it's like, I feel their pain even more whenever they select this just oddball crap. And then they push it and nothing happens. And then they call over an attendant. I'm like, you are dedicated. Like this was on your heart the moment you walked in. You wanted the peach, cherry, lime, soda, diet, Coke, fake sugar, whatever. It's just so, I don't know. They're all trying to force us into one thing.
Yeah, it's really, and then it becomes like the fear of missing out. Because the more ridiculous flavors you add to that
FOMO,
soda, you're coming very close to screwing up every additional and the disappointment that follows. So me with my pure water, I am that one-celled organism of peace and zen. So if I could convey one thing to people, like, you just think about that soda machine and what it's doing to your stress level in life. Are you asking too much of life when you step up to the soda machine at Chipotle?
Do you know what? This is why, too, I pack my own lunch whenever I go to work, because I've found that the more decisions I have to make throughout the day, the more it just kind of, it will like fatigue my ability to put up with bullshit. I don't know. And I have a bunch of coworkers and they love to go out to eat on lunch, but I swear they come back more frustrated and stressed out than if, hey, I'm just going to my car. I'm going to kick back, listen to some Knifepoint horror. I'm going to eat my little lunch here. I'm just going to enjoy myself in some solitude.
Yeah, I agree.
Not on my job. I don't listen to Soren Narnia on my job. Just
the many psychological elements of going to lunch with coworkers. That's another show entirely. But yeah, simplicity. I remember watching The Fly. And the scene where Jeff Goldblum...
Which one?
Okay, the David Cronenberg,
yeah.
right. And him explaining to Gina Davis, showing her his closet. And that's the first time I heard of the theory of, I just wear the same thing every day. I just grab the next one because I don't have to think about it. Now, when I saw The Fly, I originally thought, well, that's just weird. But then eventually I saw the genius of that. That is a absolutely genius move. And in that could be the key to life itself on Earth. Grabbing the same thing off the rack every day and applying that to every aspect of your life, the simplicity. And I think that will get if I could do more of that, if I could do add one more level of simplicity to my life every year, I think I would, work towards some kind of happiness, real happiness. Because I think, just on a personal level, I often think that's what it's about: eliminating all the clutter and complexity that you possibly can. That's the theory I'm banking on.
So are you happy, Soren?
I would say yes. Say yes. Just knee-jerk reaction. How about you? Would you like if the question were sprung on you?
I would say yes,
Right.
definitely. And for me, a big part of being happy is finding peace and contentment. And I found that, peace comes from stability, and contentment comes from, I guess having the weird part of my brain scratched, being able to have these conversations, with authors like yourself, being able to consume material that transcends me from my normal daily life is what it is. And just having children. I've quoted Nietzsche and some other philosophers, but I'm kind of an opinion that life coaches, these gurus that tell you to rise at 4 a.m. in the morning, if they don't have children, I don't really listen to them or take them too seriously anymore. So, but just watching children and watching the innate love that these little beasts have, that these little scary little monsters have. I mean, they want to love and be loved, and they don't care what kind of job I have. They don't care. They are quick to forgive, and they are just little love monsters is what they are. So, just being able to deal with them. And so that brings a lot of happiness into my life. And, but yeah, and a big part of that is, the writing too, that, the authors I've interviewed, being able to get into their books, being able to kind of take it one level further and get into their minds a little bit on the show. Although I feel like I do better with some than others. And a big part of it is just sleep, especially with my little one, not really letting me get sleep. But
that's funny. Like new parents, your reality is just distorted because of the lack of sleep.
Oh yeah.
Your life is so different. And I'm so thankful every day. Like so many people I know, they're on various sleep medications, sleep aids, just minor stuff, because they're just not. It's all about your job and your responsibilities, and you're trying to carve out a sleep life, which is one of the most important things for your health and your happiness. And I'm so grateful that I have the freedom to kind of experiment with my sleep life and screw it up with no ramifications. But how many guys have I talked to, new dads, and and everyone tries to describe to me what it's like to just be constantly without enough sleep. And you can see it, when you work with someone, you can see it every day in the office. They're changing their personality is just a little bit different. This is still a really good guy, but he's a different person, just slightly different because of lack of sleep.
It will definitely get you. Well, so what do you think about death? Are you, to kind of move to a nice subject, kids, happiness. Let's talk about death, because I've kind of seen that come up a couple times. You've mentioned that you're thinking about your mortality. I think the last time I had you on here.
Yeah, it's because of you, Frank. If for some reason talking to you is what does it, I start to think, oh man, I gotta get all these issues in the universe, ironed out before I go. So that's where
well, it all started when you said I was an art thief. And no, I'm joking. That's when
I'm still trying to figure out, by the way, why you asked for my credit card number before we begin these interviews. That I do find that a little bit strange and suspicious, but I assume that it's all going to be okay.
For all of my guests, I asked for what street that you grew up on as a kid. I asked for the name of your first pet. All of that is just so I can verify your identity whenever you come on the show. That's all.
I feel totally assured.
And the credit card helps me keep the number safe, is what it does.
Okay, good. That's good. That's very good. That's very good. Death. I'm afraid of it. I got to be honest. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of how it was designed in our existence. I'm not sure why it has to be. It feels kind of like we were implanted with just such a terror of it that we just can't get over no matter how we try. I think part of it is, again, our society at this point in our civilization, our attitude toward death is simply not there. We need a few more levels of civilization to understand and accept death, because we cannot accept it. Human beings cannot. We fight against it. And maybe that's just part of we're not there psychologically. It's going to take another few thousand years probably. But I've never done well with it. I think I'm probably right on the average level of worrying about it, thinking about it, right in the median there, I would say. Very typical human being. With death, I think it's unfair and horrible, and I don't want any part of it. Yeah, as Cat Stevens said, no, that was trouble. But anyway, death, not a fan. How about you, Frank?
So I have a couple of thoughts about it. As a father and a husband, I don't want to die because of the people around me, would suffer. But at the same time, it's like I've never been fearful of death. And I don't know, what makes one person feel, and there's no right or wrong answer to it, And ultimately, everything I'm saying, I'm 99% sure of. If death were to sit across from me right after this interview, I don't know if I would be this calm or not. But I guess a non-morbid way, like I like living, I don't want to die, but a part of me is kind of looking forward to that final experience. What Frank Herbert said is that, everything in society can be boiled down to women preparing themselves for childbirth and men preparing themselves for death. And he said this in God, Emperor of Dune. And I'm one of the folks that thinks that fiction tells reality better than nonfiction does. I think you'll learn a whole lot more about the world and the people in it if you read a good novel, if you read a good short story. And there was, if you read the Apology of Socrates, and they asked him that question, hey, which the story of him is that, he was accused of corrupting the youth of Athens through his philosophy, because he would teach them, hey, here's the Socratic method, what we call the Socratic method of questioning, and they were questioning the elders. Long story short, the city officials, they drug him, in front of the courts. He was unrepentant, so they convicted him, and then they sentenced him to death. He had to drink some hemlock, which is the philosopher's drink, as they say. And in his apologia that he gave in defense of himself, he basically said, look, and he says, I'm not scared to death. This is something every human being has experienced and will experience. And he said, what a profound thing. And he says, where we're at right now, this is what it means to be human, is to experience this final reality, to experience reality itself. So from a strictly Platonic sense, Soren, I don't fear death. A part of me is kind of excited about this final phase that me as a human being will have, but I'm very much in the camp of, I believe that right now I'm a caterpillar, and I think death is going to be the cocoon. And I've seen things in my life that absolutely makes me believe that reality is non-material and that consciousness survives death. Absolutely makes me, I am just convicted of that. And what that is, I don't know. I don't think, we've had some stories in history of people who have died and come back, but we have built such a facade around them that we may never know what that truth ultimately is this side of it. So for me personally, because of some hard-boiled facts and evidence, I don't dread it. I definitely don't dread it. Now, I say that right now when I'm calm, when I'm in this nice room that's with some electricity that's going through the house that's barely 200 years old. I can wake up every morning. I can get in a combustible engine that's heated and cooled. I have access to food, the likes of which the Roman emperors couldn't even have. And so it's easy for me where I'm sitting to say all of this. But I also want to knock on wood for the universe's sake and let them know I'm not tempting you. I'm not trying to step out of line here. It's not arrogance. It's simply a healthy respect, but I definitely don't fear it. Part of me is excited, and I think it's going to be the next phase for me as a person. That's what I think.
Long ago, my Aunt Grace, when I was a kid, she bought me a continuing subscription to Reader's Digest. And I will never forget the best thing I ever read in my Reader's Digest. It was a little snippet. It was like, one of those Life in these United States things. And it was a priest talking about how one of his parishioners came to him and said, I'm really afraid of dying. And the priest said to him, an unborn baby just before birth is terrified to emerge from the womb, from that darkness into something, because he has no idea what's beyond, what's out there, and struggles and cries and fights against it, and then it's out and it's alive. And he explained to his parishioner maybe that's what death is. So we would say to that little baby, don't be afraid because you're going from something you don't know what's beyond. Come out and we're partying here. Why should we not think that death is the same thing? We're terrified to leave this life because we just don't know what's beyond. That's the reason. And maybe part of it is because, maybe I'm not so afraid of death as I am the process. Maybe what it all comes down to, we're all afraid of the process of dying. We're afraid of the ramifications, to the loved ones. If we knew no one on earth, if we had no friends, no family, no loved ones, I think our fear of death plummets, because we're only responsible for ourselves, and death would be simply us stopping. That's it. You start to have wife, kids, relatives, so many human connections, then death takes on, it gets complicated, as you know. I think maybe it's the process that I fear. I don't, as Woody Allen said, I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens.
I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would like to, to acknowledge to any of our viewers, if you are going through something, where someone is suffering and they're knocking, on death's doorstep, we're not trying to make light of that at all. Me and Soren, we've experienced, folks close to us who have passed away. We've all walked that walk before, but kind of going back to what you said though, Soren, about our shared humanity and being able to kind of break through these artificial constructs and see, and hey, you know what? We all are going to die one day. If anything, that should be something that cuts across economic, social, racial, religious, all facets of society right there. What a great starting point. It's a shame that we make our starting point violence as we've set up this Hobbesian Leviathan government of ours, but it's kind of our structure. But yeah, man, I think that death is a cocoon. It is the night that lies between 2 days, as an old Jewish saying is. That's definitely not original to me. So Yeah, that's kind of how I think about it, man. But yeah, that's and I've always been really intrigued with how you handle death in your stories, and I guess that's why I asked that question. I wasn't just trying to be a downer. I was trying to be a downer. I was trying to bring you down in full disclosure now. But but another part of that is I feel like I'm going to have more insight into your stories now, is what I think. Like, because there's definitely a little piece of yourself in all of them. You know?
Yeah, I think that's unavoidable whenever you write something. If you write enough stuff, clever people will be able to see pretty deep into the patterns. And I'm sure that there are patterns of how I think about death in the stories. You can kind of really nail my attitude about death in them, because it's
what I've done, Soren. So what I've done is I've compiled a list of some criticisms of your writing that I think can. I'm joking. Wouldn't it be fun if it just?
Oh man, I was so ready. I was so ready.
I was so ready. Oh man, that was good. But yeah, let's see. So we have talked about. We talked about ontology, epistemology. We talked about death. We talked about the final things that's coming on. So I wanted to ask you, so we talked about the Fermi Paradox to kind of, to jump us into another rabbit hole. And so you have an idea of what the Fermi Paradox is, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a solution to the Fermi Paradox? I've identified about 150 possible solutions.
Goodness.
That break down into little subcategories, but I didn't know if you had thought about this, if there was anything.
Well, I guess, so the essence of the Fermi Paradox, if you boil it down, is, why does the universe have certain apparent significance or insignificance? Or, like, why is that? I don't know. Like, you say you have 150 different takes. What is? Just give me one. I can rebound off it. I can build on it.
Oh Lord. Okay. All right. I feel like
I've never had to think about it. I never.
So, like a low key question here, Soren, is this the look you get whenever you're thinking of a story? Like whenever a story is starting to like kind of assemble itself?
Yeah, you can tell when
this would be a good statue, actually.
When I really
can put
puzzle
it
over
outside
something.
of a Starbucks.
It's funny. I've noticed when I puzzle over something of a light nature, I look skyward. When I puzzle over deep universe type stuff, it's more of a down. The face goes down. That's how you know that's a tough one. That is.
But you could be deceiving me. You could be my brain could be in a vat, and you could be deceiving me with that observation about yourself to throw me off. So one of the solutions, excuse me. So one of the solutions to the Fermi Paradox, and I'm just going to throw them out as it comes into my mind, is a great filter theory. And the idea behind it is this, is that civilizations will reach a point of technological advancement where something stops them dead in their tracks. They never make it off planet. They never arrive at the level of, let's say, a Kardashev level 1 civilization. And there's been different theories on this. Maybe they advance technologically to where they destroy themselves, which that could happen to some, but not all, if the universe is as big as it is. And if there is, billions of civilizations or the potential civilizations. And another sub aspect of that is maybe there's a natural disaster, maybe a burst of gamma rays, maybe a sunspot, sends them back into the Stone Age or something. But the great filter can be pretty much as big as your imagination. It's just that civilizations reach a point and there's this filter that nobody can get through. Nobody can arrive at a Kardashev level 1 or level 2 civilization where we can make observations about them. So that's one solution to the Fermi Paradox. Another equally terrifying. And so one of the debates in the great filter argument is is the great filter for humanity in front of us, or have we already passed it? So that's one of the spooky kind of questions. But yeah, so that's one of them. And to throw another one into your, your brain there to kind of churn through is this is called the dark forest solution to the Fermi Paradox. And the idea is that if there's a hunter in a forest, a lot of the creatures, the animals, will naturally get very quiet. They'll naturally hide if there's something in the forest that doesn't belong. And so when we look out and we don't see anything, we don't hear anything, maybe they're just trying to hide. And what are they hiding from? So that's called the door. Those are two solutions to the Fermi Paradox.
Yeah, how about, maybe the simplest solution of all is just a matter of size and space and time. That, how we're talking about the universe may be infinite. Well, if that is the case, then there's no reason to assume that no matter how far we project our observation and intelligence, that we would ever find anything with our technology. We assume that our technology is even 1/10,000,000th of what it takes to detect something out there. So maybe you can't even conceive of the mathematical calculation that actually expresses the size of the universe and how far away some other civilization is. I think that would be one of the simpler explanations. Just like at a physical level. I think I would go with that maybe.
So are you familiar with John Michael Goldier at all on YouTube? I'm not sure if you've...
Nope.
I need to send you some of his YouTube stuff, but it's really good. But he addresses this solution to the Fermi Paradox, and I'm trying to think what he calls it. It's either the observable dilemmas solution to the Fermi Paradox. And it's basically, hey, due to our current level of technology, due to the fact that, galaxies are expanding faster relative than the speed of light from us, if the universe is infinite, plus there's a time and all this. What he said is a possible solution is that if the universe is infinite, then it's infinite years old. It doesn't really have an age. It's just so vast and old. And if you are let's say, Kardashev level 3 civilization, 1,000,000 years doesn't really matter to you. Hey, because if you're traveling at, let's say, 10% the speed of light, and you're looking at just the Milky Way, you can get from one side to another, I think in like 100,000 or 200,000 years is what you can do, which is nothing in geological time. And if you're a species where you either won't die, your energy, or you have a lifespan millions of years, then what difference does it make to hop from one galaxy to another? And when you look at the numbers, though, and this is where that solution to the Fermi Paradox, at least in my opinion, kind of runs up against some problems. If the universe is infinite and given enough time, we should see something. We should see something somewhere, because if there's an infinite amount of time, then someone would have thought to look at the Milky Way. Someone would have thought to look at planet Earth that is giving out a techno-6 signature as we speak, and that is giving out a bio-6 signature for, at least 1 billion years. We've been giving out a bio-signature. So if you were an alien civilization that existed 2 million years ago, you could look at planet Earth and be like, hey, there's life there. We don't know what kind of life, but there's definitely life there. And we can't say that about a lot of planets right now. So it simply goes is that the more you calculate the numbers and the more you add them up, the more you just kind of look out there like no one tried this. No one left a von Neumann probe anywhere in the Milky Way galaxy, which maybe they did and they're hiding. We don't quite know, but he went into the mathematics behind it and some of the issues of, the observer's dilemmas, the idea that it's just so big, it's so infinite, it's so expanding that, of course, we haven't seen them yet. But really, though, the same premises that you gave could be turned around on the argument itself. Well, because it's so big, because we're expanding, we should have seen something by now anyway.
Well, let me throw this one at you then. Is it possible that let's just call them the aliens, they have always been here? The aliens have taken the form of something that we just can't explain, and that is actually the alien presence. Like you're talking about the story Colony and one of the things I thought of in the beginning of that story was that how we have this weird relationship with animals on the earth. These are alien beings that we share the earth with and have always, they're so different. They're so different. Is it possible that there is an alien presence around us at all times that has always been there, that shapes our thoughts maybe? Maybe it's embedded in our limbic systems, some sort of, like in altered states where there's something in our bodies passed through generations that there's like an alien seed that causes us to be nostalgic. That is it in the plaque in our teeth? Is it possible that it's already here? And this is why. And where we think of, well, an alien civilization or aliens, that's something that will be out there, that we will diminish the space between us until one day there they are. Is that just completely the wrong way to think about what they might be?
There is no wrong way to think about it. I can tell you that. And plus, concerning alien life, we only have a sample size of one, us, Earth. But that is a solution to the Fermi Paradox. It's called the zoo hypothesis. And there's a ton of different variations of it. The one that you just articulated is known as the close Earth hypothesis, the zoo hypothesis, the idea that the aliens are in our atmosphere, the idea that they may be embedded in our history, that time may not really apply to them. And if time doesn't apply to them, how can we quantify them properly? And would we recognize them? Could they simply be a weird strand of our DNA? Because our DNA is packed with all this stuff that we just think is junk. As a matter of fact, I think they call it junk DNA. So the zoo hypothesis is for me, it's one of the more terrifying solutions to the Fermi paradox because then it's like planet Earth, we are not in control of our destiny at that point, which may be a good thing. I don't know, but we are not the ones calling the shots. Even if it was the most benevolent teddy bear, tree hugging, alien intelligence imaginable, the fact that they made it here, they are here, they have the technology to do that, means they're the boss, ultimately. They may be a nice boss, a benevolent boss, but they have the potential to smash us if they want to. And to me, that's kind of an eerie possibility, something that I think about.
Yeah, the aliens that want us gone or want to take us out. That's a theory that, maybe it's just because we're cynical as human beings. We figure, well, if there are others, if there's like an other out there in the universe, obviously they want to do us harm, or they want to survive and they can't survive unless we're out of the way. That's kind of a very powerful and persistent thought in human beings, that the aliens, and movies ain't helping. The aliens it'll always be a struggle. It'll always be a conflict. It's like a conflict-based relationship, us and the aliens. Like 95% of us probably think there's going to be trouble. There's going to be trouble when the aliens come, or when we find them. There's going to be some kind of. Very few people, I think, that it's going to be just this divine joining of perfect harmony.
I think too, and I have two observations on that. I think if there was an alien civilization that had mastered space travel, for lack of a better term, and if they weren't, let's say that they were about 10,000 years ahead of us or 100,000 years ahead of us, then they would have come from a planet with the same evolutionary pressures that we did. They probably would have come from a line of meat eaters or omnivores. They would have come from due to evolutionary pressure, a society that, fought other members of itself. I think on some level, we would be shocked at how similar, some elements that we had with the aliens would be. And especially the species and competition and stuff. But ultimately, we may not know what their motives are. They may come here and do completely nonsensical stuff. We can't make heads or tails of it. We'll never make heads or tails of it. But for me, in 2018, the New York Times came out with an article on UAPs, which I don't like the term UAPs. I think you've heard me. Mm-hmm. I'm a UFO guy. I think that the UAPs is something our military-industrial establishment seeded into the media to try and make this palpable, to try and control the narrative. But that's my only little conspiracy theory I've nursed throughout my life. Only one. We all have to have at least one.
I think I agree. I think the moving away from UFO, it's kind of like a marketing thing, right? It's like we're rebranding the concept of the UFO in a way that'll make it to our benefit. Mm-hmm. It's a marketing thing, absolutely. Trying to shape people's thoughts.
And not only that, but it has a way of sanitizing the government's involvement with it. Because when you think UFO, we think, black box projects. We think of top secret security clearances. But with UAP, it's like, hey, the government is on your side on this. And so it's this total sanitization of the topic. Although one positive thing that it's done is they have enabled people to talk about it openly without having their careers ruined now. But in 2018, we had the emergence of the Tic Tac gimbal Navy gunship, the camera footage that came out. And they are captured on camera. And you have some debunkers that still deny it, even though, what were they, F-14 pilots, I think, or F-18 pilots, whatever they are. But they have been on record saying, no, this was not a flock of birds. It was a swamp gas. This was an object. And this is what it did. And our instruments have tracked them. And so, to me, it's like, I see this, and there's all kind of possibilities that go through my head. Very few of them are positive, to be quite honest with you. I don't quite know what, the UFOs that are coming out now that people are seeing. And I believe that they've always been here, and I believe that there's a spiritual dimension to it. But what are your thoughts on it? What are your thoughts of the UAPs, the UFO, and the recent mainstreaming of the subject now, and some of the hard evidence that has come out?
Yeah, I'm not really sure where the mainstreaming really came from. I think there was the declassification of a lot of stuff that didn't amount to a whole lot for the general public. It got on 60 Minutes, and people got excited, and then they saw the footage, and I think the footage looked to most people like a lot of the footage that we've seen before, where it's like, well, it's tough to don't quite have the context of what's going on, and then of course we have supposedly reliable professional people insisting that it's one way, and we have the government saying, well, but here are the other explanations. It feels like we, in the end, we really haven't gotten that much further than we were, say, like in the 70s. Or it feels like just in popular culture and in society in general, there hasn't been like a phase change in our thinking on UFOs for most people. It's still mostly like a fanciful thing. Maybe the footage is a little clearer sometimes, but it's still like, well, extraordinary claims, extraordinary evidence, that kind of thing. People in general still don't have that thing, that one piece of footage. And now, it's almost become, because of technological advances, it's looking like we may never have that bit of footage that convinces people, because we have now the technology to create the illusion of all kinds of things. So if you had someone from the Pentagon saying, look, we had this footage in the vault, we're releasing it, we confess, you got us, here's the footage, and it's just completely convincing, you'd still have half the country saying, nah, it's fake. They're up to something. They're doing this for some reason. Yeah, it
What
looks...
what does that tell you about the phenomenon, though, Soren? It's like people will reflexively say, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, which I'm glad that Albert Einstein didn't think that way, or the Academy doesn't really think that way. But it's like they apply that standard to certain things, and it seems like they apply the extraordinary claims to certain things that would threaten their paradigm. Because if you look at the Large Hadron Collider, there was no evidence that that particles were non-local in reality. There was no hard evidence for that. And yet they spent billions on the Large Hadron Collider. Yet Professor Avi Loeb at Harvard University was barely able to raise a couple $1 million for the Galileo project to study UAPs. And I've heard him on some podcasts and YouTube channels, and that the extraordinary claims thing was thrown at him every single corner, everywhere he goes. And the weird thing I've noticed about it is it's almost like everyone has this script that's running in the back of their head for this type of phenomenon. Whereas you could go to them and tell them a ghost story, and they'll believe that before they believe a UFO account. And I think it's because that UFOs aren't natural, that there's some intelligence behind it. So it's not going to act in a predictable way. And I'm not sure if that triggers something in our mind and our psychology or what it is, but, there's just, people react to UFOs completely different than they do near-death experiences, than they do, hey, I saw a loved one that passed away that walked into a diner. It really was, they'll give stories like that more credence than they will a UFO encounter. And I don't know why that is. It's just...
That's true. There are people who believe in ghosts and they absolutely don't believe in UFOs, and vice versa. I sometimes wonder if we have a footage problem with UFOs, in that the footage all has the same characteristics, and people have become very jaded with that. I think people were hoping when this latest round of, when it became, we started to hear more and more about it. I think a lot of people, and people I knew, were really hoping that something was going to come out of a vault or a film canister that was going to blow our minds. And until we get that, we're still like, nope. You know what? You didn't have someone on. You didn't interview someone who I know personally, who I can really trust. You don't have that footage that's going to knock me on my butt. And yet, when you turn on streaming, there are a million ghost shows with ridiculous footage of ghosts that we've all seen a million times. And you will have people saying, "Oh yeah, that was. Oh man, did you see what happened?" Like, yeah, there's something about ghosts. Maybe, again, maybe it's some kind of mortality thing where we want to believe in ghosts so badly because we want to believe that gives our lives more meaning. Where believing in UFOs doesn't give us that psychological fix that we're really looking for. Maybe it has something to do with that, but there's a difference. There's classifications of what people will believe and what they won't believe. And UFOs are still trailing in the society, still trailing. I think a lot of people will look at that 75 or so, that Bigfoot, the famous Bigfoot footage. You'll still find a lot of people who believe in that over UFOs, and the Loch Ness Monster photo, and yeah.
Oh yeah, the Bigfoot footage. I'd completely forgotten about that.
And you can see it in your mind like immediately. You know.
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, you know what? There's something so visceral about that, and I don't know, like if it's the nostalgia. I mean, the home camera. I mean, I can almost imagine someone, they're cranking the handle and the Bigfoot comes out.
Yeah, maybe
Although,
I think. So go ahead.
Oh no! Please continue.
And so there's that's the iconic Bigfoot footage. We have the iconic Loch Ness monster image, the still photo that everyone knows. There's no real iconic UFO image that we can all kind of agree like that's the one,
The only image I would say is the iconic one. And this is what's so strange about the phenomenon. If you look at it closely, it has a way of almost looking back at you and then stepping into your reality. It's probably been right in front of you too, and you may not have really thought about it like this, but the grays, the big eyes.
That's right. Yeah,
forehead,
the big, that is.
And all of that came about because of Whitley Strieber's book, Communion.
Was it the cover of that?
Yes, it was.
That set that off?
And that sank into the cultural zeitgeist is what it did. Yeah, that's right. And there's something almost, it is such an uncanny valley, the image of the gray on Whitley Strieber's book, Communion. It seems like that fellow was there watching us the entire time. And there's an esoteric tradition in Western, in the Western world of a lot of the mystics having a big forehead and big eyes. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to, I wish I had a copy of my book, the Mutants and Mystics, and I could show you a page, but there was a writer and he sketched out the image of a man who he said would show up in his apartment and tell him what to write. And he had a big forehead and like big eyes, but that's been an archetype going back a long time of like otherworldly, wisdom from a higher reality. But when Whitley Strieber came out with that, I mean, that's when the grays really kind of, went mainstream, I think, and just sank into the cultural awareness for us. Yeah,
and it's holding on. It's not going anywhere.
No, it's not. No, it isn't. And there's been some weird solutions to the Fermi Paradox that can actually accommodate that image too, that have been coming out. So it's some really cool stuff,
Well, I think, my own view of the UFO thing is let's say when I look at, say, this UFO footage, the recent stuff, I think to myself, well, it's kind of disappointing because are we saying then that basically the aliens, they have our technology just a little bit cooler and better? And that's somehow just very disappointing. Like, it seems like, well, that can't be right. That can't be what the aliens are. Like they're sending down very recognizable craft-like things because they have our technology just better. That's what we're seeing on these on this video, and it seems so unsatisfying somehow. That would be. I would think that I would hope that the aliens, when they come, it'll just blow our minds. Like we can't even conceive of what we're seeing on video. Instead, I'm seeing some lights and like a craft. Like, no, I don't want that. I don't want that out of my aliens, Frank. I don't want lights in a craft. I want something bigger and stranger.
So do you know that's actually part of the literature on UFOs? So like in the 19th century France, they said that there were men that were in hot air balloons, but better than any kind of balloon, it was really this maneuverable craft. And lots of people claim to have sightings and all this stuff. And some of the people that have claimed contact with like the Greys or these alien intelligences would ask questions about the universe. So it turned out to be wrong. Like, there's life on Mars or something in the 1930s. But this is why I think that what's weird about it is that it's intelligent. It has almost like a jokester kind of quality to it. It's elusive. And I think this phenomenon is spiritual. Like, I don't think it's nuts and bolts technology coming here. And I think it's non-material is what I think. And that's kind of my solution to the UFO paradox, I guess. Because a lot of the sightings are hand in hand with some very, very weird shit that happens to people. They've had sightings of loved ones who had passed away. Weird stuff would happen in their house. Very non-material kind of aspects would start to manifest. They would have some synchronicities, just really, really bizarre, off-the-wall kind of stuff. And this should worry you as a writer. I'll leave this little thought with you, but yeah. So some writers have had the experience of writing a scene and having that scene play out almost exactly in real life. One of the author of Planet of the Apes, he wrote a scene about some home invaders that came into a man's home, held him at gunpoint, robbed him, and beat his wife up and left. And that happened to the author like a year after writing this book. They were dressed almost the exactly same way as they were in this book. And even where he had the cash hid. And on the one hand, you could say, well, you know, maybe what's happening is a writer is such a student of human nature. They're running all these different scenarios in their head. What does it matter if one or two of these scenarios, they actually play out in real life? That's just kind of like random chance. But again, to bring up Jeff Kripal, he has example after example after example of this happening to authors. Like they've stepped into like a little segment of their own book. Really weird stuff. And stuff that isn't even like published yet. You know, it's like, let's see, he gave an example in Mutants and Mystics of an author. He had a manuscript that he had never published before. And apparently this was back in the days of doing it on a typewriter. So it was sitting in like his sock drawer or something. But he was going to a bookstore that was in New York. And I'm trying to think of the story. It was in chapter 9 about the super realities writing us. And he encountered two characters that dressed, talked, and their names were exactly like in his book. And they even said they were from towns that he had written about, where these characters were from. And he said it was the most bizarre experience of his life. Like the most bizarre experience. And one of his characters was a pilot, and one of these people whom he met was a pilot. I mean, the lineup was just extraordinary. And, you know, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if you run against anyone who you think is from Knifepoint Horror, I would run the other way very fast. But this phenomenon is just weird. And the closer you look at it, Soren, the more like there's really no category that can contain this. But people have these experiences, and then they end up having like a UFO experience. It's some really weird stuff, man. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to ramble.
Well,
there.
yeah, like the phenomenon of deja vu really, really weirds me out sometimes. And yeah, of course, we all read the explanations, but I think, damn, doesn't that just feel like there is some sort of parallel reality going on somewhere, or I have actually experienced that moment, and there was just a little bit of disjoining between reality, you know, the track that we're supposed to be on, and then the matrix kind of pokes through. Isn't that just what it feels like? You know, with aliens, it's almost like if someone were to say, you know, I swear to God, I think I may have had an alien encounter, and I would say, well, describe what happened. And if they were to say to me, well, it's weird, I was out walking, and there was just this sunset that was just the strangest colors I've ever seen, and then I felt like my hands were wet for some reason, and that's it. Something would be like, you know what? I think I might believe them, because that's somehow, yeah, it's not about a craft coming down. It's something weird happening. And maybe this person's saying, yeah, for some reason I just felt like I was being visited. Like I think, oh, now that gets my attention, because that is strange. Like if we have an alien experience in our life, it would just be something so weird, but would just leave us with the sense that something came from elsewhere, mixed with our reality for a bit, and then disappeared. It would be something that indefinable, that intangible, and that strange. Yeah, I would like to hear more stories like that. Yeah.
My friend, there is a whole canon of UFO experiences just like that, and stranger still.
Yeah, that's the good stuff.
Like,
that's
yeah. So Whitley Strieber said that he can always tell when, and Whitley Strieber, to his credit, he doesn't try and put them in a category. Like, you'll never hear him say that they're aliens. He'll never say that they're us from the future. He'll never say that they're interdimensional or transdimensional, whatever the heck that even means. He tries not to put a label on it. But what he did say in his podcast, the Undiscovered Country, I think, or he may have renamed it since, I can't quite remember, but he said that if their experience, their story isn't strange and slightly embarrassing, then he doesn't believe them.
Mm.
He says they're piggybacking off of something that they said. And like you said, like if someone told you a story of like, hey, I had this liminal experience and it was esoteric kind of, you know, what better way to communicate with a human than with our imaginations, you know, than with our perception of reality. It's really, really neat, you know, little stuff there. But
yeah, I would love to find out that deja vu is like an alien force. Maybe just their electromagnetic field that they bring kind of screws up sometimes. And one of the effects it has is if you're in it and you get zapped, briefly you are thrown out of your own reality and you're thrown back into your own past briefly. You don't know why. It turns out the aliens, you know, they didn't have it on channel 3, or you know, they were getting too fancy with some new little machine. They said, "Oh man, don't do that too often, because the human beings are going to catch on that deja vu is actually us screwing up." It's like, will you get this straight? Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
I'm ready. I'm ready for the aliens. You know, anytime I'm ready. I will not freak out. I will not overreact. I will not go insane. So if the aliens want to come, I can deal with it.
You know, I think it all depends on how far away they are or how close they are, and what we can perceive of their technology. Because, like, if they show up like Independence Day, then yeah, I'm probably going to build my bunker. But I mean, you know, because like, what if we discover the aliens are real, but they are so far away that there's nothing that we could ever do? Like, we could tell you, hey, that planet has life. That planet has an intelligent civilization on it. They have radar, and that's it. I mean, or they have this, you know, or they're jumping across time, you know.
Right, or it's sometimes I think it'll be a case of they don't even have a conception of what technology is, because they left technology behind millions of years ago. And they're just dealing with the level. They travel via consciousness. They travel within, you know, it could be that also, I think. Like technology, what's that? You all still deal with technology?
Yeah.
That's why you're sitting on Earth
you guys
while all the good stuff is going on elsewhere. Losers.
Yeah, seriously, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, now, I will tell you what is really, really scary to think about, to kind of segue into the expanding, the infinite universe as it expands. Anything that you can conceive of like monsters are real somewhere, given enough time and given enough space and energy. Any of that can be real. So I've often thought, well, you know, whenever I was growing up, my scariest monster was a werewolf. Dracula was just cool.
Mm.
You know, the ghost I was never really scared of. I could always just leave the haunted house. The Exorcist did kind of keep me up a little bit, but a werewolf though, shit. I mean, and plus werewolf, there's so much. Yeah. Plus with the
Moves
werewolf.
fast. You're not getting away from it. It's coming after you. Yeah.
And I think you wrote a short story, Bargain. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. It was Bargain. Yeah, that's right. You wrote a werewolf story. I'm assuming it was a werewolf. It certainly seemed like
I think
it.
that was just a good old-fashioned werewolf. Yeah.
It was. I loved it. And what I loved is like in a lot of your old the European lore, a lot of the werewolf encounters would always involve a transaction of some type. And there was normally money with someone, they're crossing a bridge. They paid across the bridge. The person they paid was a werewolf. And I thought it was funny that your main character was paid by, there was a transaction between him and the werewolf. Mm-hmm. And he carried the werewolf to where he wanted to go, which in a lot of the European folklore, the werewolf would end up being transported unknowingly by the person that took their silver. Normally 30 pieces of silver, but it was kind of.
I just watched the original Wolfman movie for the first time. The original Universal movie. I had finally got around to checking that one off the list. So I think I'm. It's funny in movies like I read somewhere. Well, 2020 or 2021 was going to be the year of the werewolf. We're going to have all these great werewolf movies, and just never.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, they were cranking them out, and
it passed me by. Yeah.
Yeah, it just didn't seem to happen. I see, sometimes on streaming, a thumbnail will go by like, oh yeah, that's right. That was a werewolf movie from that year. It just didn't really hit it. But I still think we need better werewolf movies. I think.
You know what? There was so much. Well, this is just my opinion. I think that what Universal Studios did, they added some mythos into the werewolf that just really was never there. Like, changing during a full moon, the silver bullet, the wolf's bane, the gypsy's curse, the palm of your hand and all that. I mean, that was. Of course, it could be all made up. I don't know. I'm like, no, that's not how they really are. But if you look at like the real lore of it, especially that European Asiatic lore, they were creepy, just absolutely terrifying. And they were esoteric as hell. Like there was like occult stuff going on and they represented like this primal, untamed part of human nature, but also this real existential evil that transcended nature is what they represented. And I kind of feel like the werewolf movies today, well, you're just different. It's a virus. It's DNA. They've taken the metaphysical out of it. And they did to werewolves the same things that they've done to vampires is what they did.
Mm-hmm. Maybe classed them up too much. It's possible to class up a villain so much that they're just boring and they're not scary anymore. Yeah. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of when you were talking about how this infinite number of monsters out there with enough time and space, I still entertain myself by thinking, down below the ocean, there's trenches that we still haven't gotten to.
Oh, yes, that's right. Giant squid. I'm ready for the giant squid.
Stuff down there that is just already, sometimes I see images, I'm like, oh my God, what is that? And we haven't even gotten down really into the trenches as far as we can go. So there's more real monsters a-coming. Maybe we found all the ones on the basic terrestrial surface. Maybe we've run out. Maybe there's cave systems somewhere, like in the Descent, where we'll find some new monsters. But it's the bottom. It's drilling down under the ocean. We're gonna get some good monstrous stuff still in sometime.
Well, so how about this as a scary thought? So a bunch of our gas giants, like Jupiter and Saturn, they have moons around them, right? Well, a lot of these moons are frozen. It's basically, they were water worlds and they're frozen. And they have thousands and thousands of, feet of ice. And scientists at NASA, they believe that there's liquid. I know, I'm sorry, me and my brother, it's kind of an inside joke. Them smart scientists folk, up there at NASA, they think they know everything, damn it. But we're like, but the moons have, these ocean worlds underneath all that ice. And so so a bunch of the physicists have been trying to think of ways we can melt and go down into the ice and explore those oceans in the moon.
Yeah, don't do it, man. We're just at that.
I know. I'm telling you. That's the perfect setup.
Just leave the freaking moon alone, man. Look, we got out of there unscathed the first time. The fact that sometimes they talk about going back, it's the perfect setup for a horror scenario. They return to the moon 50, 60 years later, and this is what we got too curious. Yeah, don't do it. Vote no.
On the moon. To exploring the ocean of Europa. We don't need to go there.
No, just yeah.
That's it.
Oh, man. Well, we've come to a number of notable conclusions here. None more important than the soda discussion, I think. I think we really did some good work there, especially talking about the soda.
Well, it really led up to the soda. This was about the soda. And as a matter of fact, I think we are in a reality where we are different flavors of soda, and someone's about to push the button. And
that's fine. That's fine.
Right.
I accept it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Soren, I really, really appreciate you sitting down with me.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Definitely it is. It
just
certainly
feels
is.
like we should be like on a dark porch in the country, somehow looking out over a field. That's what this conversation really feels like.
Really does. It really has kind of like a campfire-y kind of sense to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think it does. And hey, we both hike up and down the Appalachian Trail. I think we both hiked and camped up there, so we probably have some good stories about that. So whenever I'm hiking in the woods, like the sound, I don't know if you've ever had, the impression as well. Our last rabbit hole, and then I'll let you go. But you can hear an acorn fall, and it sounds like a damn tree trunk fell. Sound is so weird in the woods. I mean, it doesn't surprise me how folks get lost, and it's just a really weird effect.
Yeah, people often, they keep trying to get me to do night hikes in the woods. And I say simply, are you nuts?
Yeah, that's some scary stuff.
Every sound is going to make me so paranoid. And I'm not even really sure what I'm afraid of, but you can't have darkness plus, all that sound of the woods. No way am I going on a night hike.
The key to doing a night hike, and I've done a couple of them, is do not start a fire before you go, because if you start like a little campfire and then everyone decides to go, you are going to be terrified to step outside of that campfire.
Right.
It has the most eerie effect whenever you look behind you and you're like, oh man, it's getting dimmer and dimmer. I'm going away from it, and you're just going to like a tunnel of blackness. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, just those first steps, I think.
Yeah, I know.
Really, campfires alone when I'm hiking creep me out a little bit because it creates that stark contrast between light and shadow, because it makes everything else so dark. So you have that nice glow around the fire, and then you turn around, and it makes the dark of the woods seem so much more sinister.
It does, yeah.
Well, let me revise my statement. I will go on a night hike, but we're talking minimum of 4 people. So I need me,
exactly,
I need at least 3 other people, full headlights. Then I'll do it. I'm going on record. Minimum of 3 people. Otherwise, I'm just terrified.
Are you going to lead the group, or are you going to be in the back, or are you going to try to be in the middle?
Let me be third. I think I'd feel comfortable.
Third, okay, third. Yeah.
The second I slip to fourth, I will die. Second, I'm probably too close. I might see something spooky over the person's shoulder up ahead. So yeah, third is all right.
There we go. Well, there we have it. This is how we're going to get Soren on a night hike. I love it.
Oh man, I don't even talking about it, I'm getting the creeps.
Oh yeah. Wait, Soren, again, I really, really appreciate this. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Good times.
And I say offline, we need to have round 3 one day. I say we have round 3, go down rabbit hole. We can cover some other stuff.
Yeah, I say next time we shrink the universe. We deal with more things that are more in front of us, more like psychology.
Oh, okay.
More like
Okay.
society. Let's bring it in, because we got big. We've gotten big. Now let's get small.
We started here, and now we're going to narrow it down, narrow it. So yeah, all right, cool.
Because we can solve today's problems. We can.
That's right.
We can do it.
We certainly can. That's it. Let's solve them. I will see you, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your night. All right.
You too.
Thank you.
See you.